Maybe in the last minute of your life, you want to be something more than a goddamn savage! Sanguinarias Annunziare Netaccio. Prego, sono Domatus. Insanity. He watches the game fantasy. Wheel one, forbidden sight. He searches under up the shadows and like this, girl. You like being food for the immortal.
What is happening, my savage friends? You are listening to the voice of the immortal Coil, your oracle of whiskey mysticism. Revolution is my name. It is Sunday, the 12th of March, 2023. Fuck that van. 10:53 p.m. West Coast Pacific Standard Time. And it is time, my friends, to get savage. Welcome in all. I appreciate each and every one of you, whether you are listening to this broadcast live or joining us in the replay. I'd like to invite you to hold high whatever it is you are imbibing and join me in the savage salute. Here is to us. What is like us? Not a goddamn thing. Tastes like the frustration born out of the need for revolution. And indeed, revolution is my name. I'd like to remind you that the Savage Show is not for children. This broadcast will contain strong language, sensitive subject matter, images, and content intended for a mature, 18 years or older audience. Viewer discretion is advised. This broadcast contains copywritten content. However, under the Fair Use Act, Section 504C2, Title 17 of the U.S. Code, this content is presented for the purposes of education, entertainment, through the use of parody, satire, critique, analysis, and/or social commentary by means of subjective opinion. Which means, buckle up, kids. The ride's about to get bumpy. I'd like to thank you guys for showing up tonight. We just had a pretty good broadcast over on the United Resistance channel, where I was joined by my good friend Drew, the Supreme Heretic. We come at you Sunday nights on that channel, roughly around midnight East Coast time, to present you with a program called Midnight Prism, where we sort of do the sightings, unsolved mysteries, sort of tropes, piercing the veil as it is and asking you to consider a broader view of reality. Drew himself is very well researched, but he reserves the right to form a 100% conclusion about the subject matter. We do have our good friend Corey, who is more scientific, and he wants to see solid evidence. And then you have myself, the Savage One, Immortal Coil, filling the role of the experiencer. And I'll tell you what, just as soon as we start to get wound up on a subject, it seems that the program starts to draw to a close. So it's just as well, it will attract viewers to this particular broadcast. We started talking about the government teams who go in and have to clean up after an official response, whether it happens to be in response to cryptid activity or UFO related activity, there are teams that are trained and implemented and deployed to deal with such incidents. The topic of the show from the Midnight's Prism was about cryptids and specifically Sasquatch-like beings, where we discussed in the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption. Purportedly, there were bodies discovered, and then the government had to send some teams out to do some cleanup. And then if you're a fan of Art Bell and sort of what's that guy's name? Stephen Greer, where they get together governmental witnesses and ex-employees and things of that nature to discuss the teams that they send out to go and retrieve downed craft and deal with bodies should they arise. Now, what's the impetus for this? Why is there such a need for these sort of responses? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's there is a concerted effort to present humanity, Terran humanity specifically, as the only valid sentient race present on Earth. And why is that? Well, being such a Sasquatch who occupy this landmass independently of humans, and indeed the Americas specifically, they roamed across the Americas before humans ever set foot in it. Now, science will tell you that there was the Bering Strait land bridge. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say humans were placed here. How can I say that? Well, stick around. We'll talk about that. There's also been reports that a terrestrial human-based reptilian intelligent being had evolved over the millions of years and stick to the underground. Now, this is separate from reptilian beings from Alpha Draconis or what have you. This is a separate race. But here we have instances of two separate intelligent species that would be operating alongside of humanity. And again, once the worldview changes, where we embrace the fact that we are not alone, that's going to change the way that humans relate to their own government. Because it's like, okay, well, does our government apply only to human activity? Can it possibly apply to other intelligent beings? And if it does or could or should, what is the impetus for them to cooperate? And force of threat, pain upon death, that sort of thing. Is that even ethical? Do we have dominion over species not of our own? There was there's a thing in genetics, and I'm one of these people. My girlfriend got me at the time, I am very single right now. My girlfriend at the time got me a 23andMe kit where you send a swab and then they analyze your DNA. And there's a big thing about Neanderthal DNA, and Neanderthals went extinct and blah, blah, blah. It was very sad. But what ended up happening was the larger human population absorbed the Neanderthals. So they're alive somewhat within us. Although they could probably do that Jurassic Park thing and take a bone and then grow one in a jar. That's what they really wanted to do. It's interesting. When we speak of response teams, because there was a comment in the last program where families of people who were responding to UFO incidents where a human death had occurred are being denied benefits and being denied knowledge of their loved ones' final moments. And that's all in service of the secret of the conspiracy. And it goes deep. It goes pretty deep. Now, my own encounters. I've been in contact with non-human intelligence since uh, before I was a teenager. The earliest I can remember would have put me in around second, third grade, somewhere in there, where I started having encounters with beings. Um, it didn't really ramp up into something intelligible, capable of, uh, I don't know, adult reasoning until I was in my 20s. Um, there was one particular incident where there were uniformed humans and a base involved in it. Um, Now I can't really tell you exactly where it was, um, just that I was there, and I can tell you certain things that I saw. But the fact that there is an element of human military interfacing with extraterrestrial intelligence, and what particular benefit we would all have for maintaining the secrecy. One of the ideas that I floated out there is that the big conspiracy isn't that there's extraterrestrial intelligence visiting the Earth, as it were, uh, and that the Earth is under threat from alien technology. Uh, Not at least by the aliens themselves. The Earth is under threat from extraterrestrial technology from the humans who have reverse engineered the extraterrestrial technology and seek to hold the rest of us hostage, essentially. And the amount of technology that's currently being held is not being utilized in a way to bring benefit to humanity. I was just musing about how the biggest block to human progress is this idea of economy. And most of the economy is based on the consumption of energy, which when you're in your home, it's electricity. And when you're in your vehicle, it's fuel for your vehicle. And that's really where they get most of us. Because if you plug up your car, let's say, you plug up your Prius, you're like, well, yeah, my car's electric. It doesn't run on gas. But what generates the electricity that recharges your vehicle? Okay. Now, say you're one of the other 90% of people who are on the road, you're using either gasoline or you're using diesel, which is a combustion engine inside the hood creating miniature explosions, tearing apart carbon molecules to make you go to work. And ask yourself, how much do you spend at the gas pump just hoping that you'll uh, fuel up and get enough gas to go to work, to pay for the gas that you're using to go to work? It's absurd. The fundamental power structure on this earth is energy based, and it's all based on the flow of petroleum. And the oil companies have such a death grip around the necks of humanity that they're not willing to give it up. We have had the capacity for free energy technology since the end of World War II. Actually, before that, Tesla was prepared to give it to us at the turn of the century, of the 20th century. And as we all know, J.P. Morgan and company shelved his ideas. Something along those lines would have taken care of everything, not just transportation, but your home, your computer, your boats, your airplanes, whatever. We got Random Brad throwing out the hills. Hail, my friend, my thunder from down under. So we have a very concerted effort to stall humanity of its forward progress because the impetus is to keep us as consumers, as loyal customers. And too much independence is going to have us throw off our yoke, and it's going to give those guys nothing to do. And they seem to get off on that hierarchical, archetypical mentality. Okay, now the human animal is designed to compete. You know, it's at the very uh, bottom of that Maslow thing, right? So if you know who the psychologist Maslow was, he put out the idea that we have a number of phases of being that we have to pass through before we evolve to the point where we can consider things like a benevolent worldwide human family, as opposed to one that's like a socialist or communist in nature. Um, we got our R here. He's saying 100%. They want to keep us as slaves to their system. Hail RR. Welcome into the show, buddy. And then indeed with contactees per se, there's a really famous contactee who he was on Art Bell for a little while. He was speaking of uh, the solution to all this is to grant amnesty to the people who are out there working to actively suppress. And if a safe space, and forgive the term, I fucking hate that term, what it's been turned into in the public arena. If a space was created so that people who are participating in clandestine or black budget programs involving exotic technology are able to come forth without fear of death or persecution, then the story can be told that sure, at first they were afraid of the technological difference as far as a threat being posed. Something that can fly across the galaxy or pierce dimensional reality could certainly destroy us. But if you were to take this leap with me, these things have been around longer than humanity has been on Earth. And in fact, if you read the religious texts, these things were responsible for the installation of humanity upon planet Earth. I'm going to say that again, the installation of humanity upon the planet Earth. We have essentially been a slave species throughout our entire creation, in servitude of someone or something to someone to something. Indeed, the Bible said that, the gods were toiling in the garden, for there was no Adam to tow the yoke. And then Adamu, all those kind of things speak to a subservient being, to a created class of being to alleviate the gods' toil. We were service animals, right? So I start to think about all these things, like the implications for the sort of Star Trek reality. Because if we're to consider something uh, such as meaningful ongoing contact with intelligent species aside from our own, we would need to consider a few things, namely how it changes our consciousness and how it would change their consciousness interacting with us. There's various studies out there, and and I realize statistics can be skewed towards whatever the fuck you're trying to prove, but in general intelligence quotient, the number of people who are above 100 points on the IQ, which is like the minimal to be smart. If you're in the 117, 120 range, you're pretty smart. And you're starting to get into like genius IQ levels when you're like 135, 145 and above. But most people are clocking in under 100. And when I say most people, that's like 51, 52% of everybody. So you take, I mean, think about it. You take 10 random motherfuckers, you're likely to be smarter than 5 of them. You know, and they might know how to do some shit, but are they really smart? You know, you can take a monkey and teach him how to crank a crank, but is he really going to be smart? You know, I used to work with monkeys all the fucking time, right? We got our right along with us here. It says, yep, the Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets. We were created to do their labor. Yeah, we were called Lulu, which meant mixed being, but it also had the connotation of being like a sheep or an ox, you know, and they talk about it in the tale of Gilgamesh and a little bit in the book of Enoch, how there were wild men and they were shaggy and hairy and they would drink from the streams with their mouth or through like reed straws and just nothing civilized because they weren't intended to be civilized beings. They were just smart enough to pay attention, use their hands to mine gold or whatever the fuck, or to build machines or maintain the machines that were built, but not to revolt. Right? So all of these things kind of come together. And then you also have the phenomenon of, and I dislike this word too, the abductee phenomenon. This sort of thing has been going on since that time as well. Now, if you leave it up to science and the Smithsonian gatekeepers, that's sort of what I like to call them. These are the guys who have all this shit in the museum, and they'll cherry pick little lines and say like, yeah, you know, that's a cute little story, and but these guys were just farmers and they, you know, blah 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 blah. Um, they're not gonna tell you the bigger story, and a lot of these things will be edited and hidden away in the Raiders of the Lost Ark room anyway. Um, you have extra biblical tales that exist in the Apocrypha where quote unquote heavenly beings came and interacted with you know the local humans, and it was understood that the king and the priest function were fused in the metropolitan cities. So you go to ancient Sumeria, you know, Sumer, Babylon, Akkad, all that kind of stuff. You had your major city centers that had their living quarters and places of business like markets and things like that. But then they had a central temple, which was typically like a ziggurat. Um, and you find this basic design spread throughout wherever there was interactions between the heavenly gods and the humans, where you'll have your ziggurat center with usually like a flat top where the gods were supposed to descend from heavens and then be greeted and interfaced with by the king, who was also the high priest, you know. Um, and there's a big thing about um, humankind, and this is what the science geeks like to spin the yarn, how humans had evolved from monkeys who had evolved from didn't Mr. Garrison say that on South Park? Well, basically like a retarded monkey had butt sex with another retarded monkey thing, and then that thing had retarded butt sex with something else, and then here you were. And science will make an argument a little bit more sophisticated than that one, but basically the same fucking thing. And say like somewhere along the lines, they came out of the trees and they started walking on 2 legs instead of like 4 legs, and then they started picking up sticks and stones, and then they tied the stone to a stick, and then they started killing animals and making clothes out of the animals, and then instead of chasing animals around, they decided to take the animals and then like put them in fences, and then they invented farming, and then like out of farming came the cities. But no, that's not what the texts say at all. RR's right there with me. Yeah, they couldn't resist the daughters of men. We are totally getting to that. But what the actual texts say is that kingship was lowered from heaven, that cities were constructed. The first cities were constructed for the gods, but then the gods created cities for humans to inhabit. And then they taught man the tenets of civilization, right? Civilization, kingship was lowered from the heavens. And what ends up happening is that at some point, and nowhere more descriptive, at least in the cuneiform tablets, than the destruction of Ur, which survives into biblical accounts, where the gods were warring amongst themselves. They used devastating weapons that destroyed the cities and scattered humanity throughout. You also have similar tales echoed in the Mahabharata, where they talk about terrible weapons of, blazing light and sun-like things happening on the ground. We have evidence of radiation that still won't go away in the desert, of places where sand has been fused into glass, things like that. So, what the emerging story actually is, and the one that's more plausible, at least in my opinion, is that humans were created, placed in civilized urban centers, and then certain of them were dispersed, so that once they were outside of the urban centers, they had to adapt to the lands. And then that's where you got the nature based cultures who still somehow retained creation myths of gods from the skies. And there was a time when the gods were amongst men, and yes, they mated with men. The book of Enoch and the events leading up to the flood, they taught men the evils of war. They sent one city's god or patron god sent their humans against the other city's patron god's armies in order to press a point, and usually it was over territorialism. Well, the chief god said that I could have that place. Well, no, I have this place. That's your place. You go over there. Oh yeah, well I'm going to send my humans to kill your humans, and then I'll just take that place from you. Blah 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 blah. And you see that they are not, at least those beings were not much better than we are, right? It's crazy shit. um so suffice it to say, these sorts of encounters have been along the entire time that we've been alive. Now, when it comes to, and we've been speaking about, let's just say that they're the Anunnaki, right? uh they came along, they interacted with the earth in their own specific way. And then we also realized that there were multiple races occupying ancient earth at, alongside the Anunnaki. That's just one group, one encounter that we happen to have incredibly well preserved in the records, right? There are so many other cultures who will cite beings from, let's say, the Pleiades, and let's say beings from Sirius, let's say beings from Orion. These are all separate cultures that all interacted on Earth. The original name Eden was a translation that meant home in the faraway, meaning a visitor coming here and creating a shelter, which they called an Eden. It was a temporary home, you know. Um, so what we have is basically a group, and you have to look at it from a scientific mind. Okay, if you're from a different planet and you're coming here to this planet to study, you create artificial biomes, you have all these experiments going on, and you find that at least one group of, let's say, another, it's like, okay, we're gonna have to invoke metaphor here. So it's kind of like the Federation and the Klingon Empire and the Romulans all go to a planet, and then let's say the Federation found out that the Klingons had created an intelligent species, And so how are we going to study it? That sort of thing. Except here we have, let's say, the Anunnaki and the Pleiadians and the Syrians and the Orionites, or whatever, however you conjugate that. There is a created race here. There's a element of culture. There's an element of, how much do we actually allow these beings to live their own life, and do we have the right to, you know, to subjugate them, and especially when part of their creation arose from uh, non-terrestrial genetics, right? Um, it's interesting to think about. So how do you study these beings? And this is where I think it's interesting that the idea of lineage uh, is placed into the holy text. So in particular, we have the line of Abraham, who came from the city of Ur, right? And then from his seed came the three great tribes, the fucking Christians, the Jews, and the eventually the Muslims. So the idea of following a family's lineage from an extraterrestrial perspective is introduced into the holy human texts. Now, at some point, they either decided amongst themselves or they were forced uh, to pull off of planet Earth. And it's like, okay, these things that are sentient, they deserve to live their own thing. So we're going to pull off. We'll set them up as best as we can. And then we're just going to fuck off and let them have Earth. They can have Earth. Right. And what we have in its wake is we have elements of the old human priesthood and the old human kingship who remember the contact and invented various ceremonies, because you have to think like religious ceremonies and visits, like official state visits, would have been pompous, ceremonial, uh, big affairs when the gods would come down, and they'd have to have their asses kissed in specific ways, and I'm sure women were brought to them and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure ceremonial garb was a part of that, and how you're supposed to approach and who can approach and who just has to, like, go and pick berries and all that kind of shit. That all turns into culture and tradition over thousands of years, and then suddenly the gods aren't there anymore. But the idea of the gods being in outer space somewhere, up in heaven somewhere, and how do we get everybody to behave? Well, we want the gods to come back. We want to be with the gods. Well, it's okay. You just do what we say, and you can go be with the gods when you die, because when you die, you'll go to heaven, right? It's a very simple swindle, very easy. So culture is built around these traditions, and then people go on living, and then other people are trying to control the people, how they live, so that they're not producing for themselves, they're producing for the management class, the middle management, which eventually they're hoping to set themselves up once again as the demigods once their gods return, right? It's all crazy shit. It's all crazy shit. I like this question here. RR says, if we are, then we are a copy of what really is reality. Because CJH is saying, we may just be living in a simulation. Who knows? Yeah, it's very deep. So the way that I explained this all to myself, because I had gone through contacts myself, and then I had gone through spiritual transformation and Kundalini experiences, all this kind of shit, which it really bugs me when people float the shit out in a very woo-woo way, because it's not so woo-woo if you think about it. There is a concerted effort to spin this version of reality that we're being handed, namely go to school, go through the education system, get a job, run on the hamster wheel, and then crank out some kids and have them do it. that is a particular version of reality that we are being sold that's not necessarily true. When we have people outside of this sort of cultural reference who are saying, well, no, wait a second. There are things that you would call paranormal or supernatural. What happened before we were born? How come people can dream and then dream the same thing at the same time together and then wake up and remember it? How come we can have precognition? How come I know that my mother is safe after she died because she came back and visited me? There are larger realities at stake here than just what we're being handed. So the way I explained it to myself was that there is the truth of the origin of our spirit and a creator of all of everything. There's a truth of the history of our genetics, how our physicality was placed on planet Earth and where that came from. And then there's also the truth of none of that fucking matters because you're a sovereign entity. And I'll revisit that truth towards the end of the program. We all kind of tie these thoughts together. But I kind of have to lay it out this way so that you can get a little bit more of the savage perspective, right? So yeah, following family lines, and then uh, let's say the scientists from species A, and the scientists from species B, and the scientists from species C, they all have specific goals in interacting, like their experiments mutually amongst themselves all have different end goals, and the way that they see to their particular results is that they follow family lines that exhibit the sort of genetics that favor the results of the outcome of their particular experiments. You know, um, so a pretty a pretty well known race conducting genetic experiments is the Greys, and most people who watch the show know. And if not, I'm about to tell you the Greys are suffering from what we call like a genetic replicative failure because they preferred to clone more often than not. Their code's breaking down, so they needed a fresh influx of DNA. So they come and they're like, "Hey, well, these beings here are already half ET anyway, so we're going to use them to refresh our stock." And that's where the idea of hybrids come in, but they bred out their feelings, so they don't know how to take care of babies, and they don't have genitals, so they need to borrow women as incubators for part of the fetus's and I'm talking very matter of factly about this kind of stuff because the other thing that's come along is in introducing these ideas back into mainstream culture, the way that most most jives with the economic model of selling books is to create this horror narrative around it, or like you're violating my human rights and you're seizing me out of bed, and I'm not trying to say that that's not fucked up, but there's a way to go about talking about this stuff without necessarily having to sensationalize it. Just call a spade and say that there's a group of beings who are doing this for these reasons, right? Um, Whereas you have another group like the Pleiadians, you know, and they come across as very like, oh, we're beings of light and we love you and your human family, and we're, let's throw away the guns and get together and hug and kiss everybody. And the piece that we're missing here is that the beings that we identify as Pleiadians were actually involved in war and experimentation and all this shit thousands of years ago, and they feel bad about it. So they're like, "Oh shit, we got to kind of clean up what's going on here." Um, the larger the larger focus being is the human governments know that they cannot tactically repulse extraterrestrials. If they want to come here and do whatever the fuck they want, they can come here and do whatever the fuck they want. But in trying to plea bargain, I guess that's the only way I can say it, with these forces, Oh, I thought they nuked my strain for a second. No, my Wi-Fi went fucky for a second. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Okay. Ah. You guys clip that part and then make sure that you when you're clipping my show, put that part in. Um and then if you guys could go ahead and like the video, share the link, all that kind of stuff. That's the only way that my channel is going to grow. I actually have grown a little bit. I've gotten a couple dozen more subscribers in the past couple weeks. Okay, where was I going with all of that? Um, human. Okay, human governments. What's the advantage of keeping the secrecy? And it's because they want to set the stage for extraterrestrial uh, contact and frame it in terms that they can work with, right? Um, so let's talk a little bit about this the truth of none of it matters. Okay. It's going to be very, very tempting when contact occurs overtly. Because I would venture, if you're listening to a program like this, you've probably seen a UFO or you've been in this kind of thing your whole life. Maybe you don't know why, maybe you do. Um, but I would say that people listening to something like this would be more apt to take the idea of contact healthily, right? It's a foregone conclusion to most of us that the universe is so gigantic, there's so many stars that intelligent beings exist. So when they finally go, yeah, we know we've known about them for a while, and yeah, they're gonna land on Tuesday. So get ready. It's not gonna be a earth shattering kind of like, and it's not just gonna be any other Tuesday, but it's gonna be kind of like, okay, uh, it's gonna be very important to keep a sense of self, and not in the sense of you need to keep your cultural identity or your, whatever. What you need to do is not be in awe of technology just because it's advanced and works on a model that we don't yet understand. And when somebody steps off of a ship, that you don't worship them as a god. That's where I think shows like Star Wars and Star Trek can be particularly helpful, because just because somebody has a higher technology does not make them a better person than you or more of an authority in that sense. What do I mean? Well, there's still parts of the world where if you took like your smartphone and a laptop and a pistol and a lighter, you would be perceived as having godlike abilities. You know, one of the YouTube channels that I was watching not too long ago was they took tribal motherfuckers from like uh parts of India and Kashmir that you can't pronounce, and they bring them into a studio, and then they feed them Western food, and they're sitting there eating things that taste and are manufactured in ways that they have no way to do at home. So they think it's lovely, and they think it's wonderful and amazing. And we're just like, dude, you ate a Twix bar, it's not a big deal. It's a big deal to them. But does that mean that the people who made the Twix bar is better than them? No. There's just a difference in culture and technology. It's going to be important that we uh, maintain our own sovereignty and not instantly kowtow to some of these beings, because I can guarantee you there are some of those beings that if you bowed down and worship them like they're God, they'd probably dig that. They'd probably dig that quite a bit. That's also incidentally why I think America is such a big thorn in that particular program's side, because we have too many sovereign motherfuckers, right? RR says, "Beware space Jesus." Yeah, Sky Daddy. We got CJH saying, "Yep." Project Bluebeam. Yep. one of the end goals of the Catholic Church that they don't really state is that there's going to be a time when the gods return. We know throughout the Bible that anytime you see the word Lord or you see the word God, that's a translation of other words, which implies plural entities. The name for God in the Hebrew Bible was Yahweh or Yahweh, or however the fuck you actually say it. That was a specific individual, but you also have the word El and Elohim, which can be singular or plural, right? So what you have is a group of beings and one specific being that was dealing with the fucking tribe back in the day. And you get my meaning. So people who set up and inherited that specific idea are going to be keen on the idea of those beings returning, and then them being the priest class and king class once again, the interposers between humanity and the gods. Problem is that there's like 7 billion different motherfuckers, right? So that's where population control, all the shit dovetails into itself. And that's one of the points that we make in the United Resistance family. And that's one of the points that Drew likes to make, but that he's just on about his own thing. He has his own sources of knowledge. I have my own sources of knowledge. That's what I've come to. That's what makes the most sense. That actually explains like 90% of what the fuck is wrong on planet Earth. Just the fact that they are trying to dim our consciousness and distract us with certain things, poison us with other things, confuse us about who we are physically and biologically, and then they don't even want to mention spirit. And actually, our best teachers in the modern age tell us to look into non-physical realms for the truth about the origin of energy and matter and that sort of thing. And energy and matter are byproducts of consciousness ultimately. So it's all related. If they can control your idea of who you think you are, then you are not actively taking charge of the development of yourself as a conscious being. And that's why I want to argue that that is the most important pursuit in life, because you necessarily have to have a strong sense of self, and you have to have an unwavering belief in your own forward momentum and your own destiny when it comes time to deal with other beings. And when I mean other beings, I'm saying non-human entities, whether they are enfleshed entities like you and me, or if they are from different dimensions, or if they land from a ship, or if a ship materializes and they get off. You're going to have to be able to be in a place mentally where you're not going to just immediately bow down to their superiority because they flew over in a fancy ship. No, that's not what this is about. Stand up, square up, look those motherfuckers in the eye, declare your sovereignty. Welcome to my space. Can I help you with something? Not just automatically like, oh my God, you got a ship. Do you have any hot women in there? What do you like to eat? No, no. Treat it like somebody just showing up at your house. They don't have a fucking Dodge. They have a TR3B or whatever, or the Sport Craft, right? It's funny. But that's a big thing, really, because the moment that happens and the eponymous first contact, right? It's going to change everything. And I think that that's part of what the government is worried about, because if somebody lands on a ship that flew from Proxima Centauri, and that's actually like a very close by system, let's put it out a little bit further. Let's say somebody flew over from Polaris and landed. The first thing we're going to learn, the first thing that we're going to want to know is like, okay, what's in that ship? How did you do that? And then the second thing we're going to want to know is, well, if it works that way, how come we can't do that here? And then, of course, we can do that here. So then what's going to happen? Everybody in fucking Dubai and Saudi Arabia, they're going to lose their main method of income, their main source of income, you know? So we're going to have to restructure fucking everything. It doesn't have to be a big, scary thing. I think it's the next logical leap, but it does involve mental maturity. Is the human race really mentally mature at this point? No. But is it not mentally mature because it's not mentally mature, or is it not mentally mature because it's been distracted? That's what I tend to think. Yeah, distractions. Right on. We got Papa Cotton coming into the fucking discussion. How you doing, buddy? We got Kai MFS coming into the discussion. Welcome in, you guys. I appreciate you guys swinging through. Just kind of musing on some of these ET ideas. We started talking about it in the Prism about the guys who have to deal with extraterrestrial cleanup and bodily disposal and shit like that. And then what it ultimately all means, where it's all building towards, the meaning for the clandestine approach, all that kind of thing. And it's interesting to think about, we have so much potential for growth. When I see things like good Star Trek, I think about how it can be, and then I see like Hollywood trying to double down and shape that narrative and kind of control it and ascribe very ungodly qualities to well, humanity at large, but then like any potential visitors, like they would have the same sort of predatory mindset that we have. And I'm not saying that they're all angels. Certain of them certainly would, but I would have to think that a casual observer at planet Earth would just look at half the shit we do and just be like, why are they doing that? Why? They're putting on clothes and getting in a car and going to work, doing shit that they don't like doing, to buy stuff they don't really need, and then half of them are like sending signals into the outer space where they're taking their clothes off and showing their buttholes to everybody. What is up with this planet? And if I were them, I'd probably put a big like Looney Tunes type sign on Pluto that says "Stay the fuck away." For your own good, stay the fuck away from these things. That's funny. That's funny. All right. Actually, here comes Papa Cotton. He's doing some highbrow shit right here. I love this shit though. A distraction indeed to avert us from the truth about our origins that are being discovered now. If you can perceive it, you can make it real. Correct. The big thing that we're going to end up confronting, the ultimate truth, is yes, our genetics were created, but our genetics are being ran by spirit, and not just any fucking spirit. Like how do I say this without sounding like fucking Xenu? It's sort of like that Buddhist idea where you go through so many incarnations and then you're able to achieve nirvana or whatever and go and hang out with God for a second and come back and do something for creation. And the reality of a race that was created born of servitude. And you also have to think in terms like 100,000 years is not a very long time to them. It's just like a fruit fly dies in 2 weeks, and we're just like, oh, it's just 2 weeks, whatever. Same thing. We're like the fruit flies to them. So within the space of like, say, 1 million years, we're created. we realize who the fuck we are, we grow up and change the entire dynamic of the universe. Spirit and soul and flesh going through this incredible growth and development. And it's like I was saying last week, 7 billion Jedi, 7 billion Jesus Christs. Imagine that. Imagine the effect that would have on the universe. You know, when you realize that life is not about the next fucking iPhone. You know, and if I'm going to have an iPhone, I'm going to talk about shit like this. I'm not going to be making a fucking ticky-tacky fucking bullshit. I actually did get on the YouTube shorts because I found out that that's a good way to grow your channel. But I'm actually out there spitting like real facts. You know, I'm trying to get you to think about yourself, your place in the universe, your perspective. I'm trying to get you to elevate yourself a little bit. And I'm not saying become a pussy hippie, you know, fairy little motherfucker. No. Be yourself, be your sovereign self, but realize the fucking miracle that you are. You know, how fucking precious it is that atoms and the hearts of stars form this kind of complex thing, and that somebody thought enough to turn it into something intelligent. You know, you're aware in this moment now. What the fuck are you going to do with this awareness? Well, hopefully you do something constructive. Hopefully you do something to make it better for somebody else. Hopefully you're in a position to influence subtly someone else's awakening, you know? And that's also the hardest thing about this is like once you realize what the fuck is going on, trying to communicate it to somebody else in a way that they can understand, in a way that doesn't like completely blow their mind and make you sound as insane to them as you fear that you sound entertaining such thoughts, you know? Luckily I can't not be who I am, and I don't tolerate people in my sphere who are similarly false. So uh on that note, going about an hour here, I appreciate you fuckers showing up. You are certainly the best and most open-minded chat on the fucking YouTube. So in closing, I'd like to thank everybody for showing back up once again. Make sure you're hitting that like button. Share out the link if you can. Join me for one last savage salute. Here is to us, what is like us. I'm not a goddamn thing. And until next time, my friends, stay savage.